Hi, I'm Dave Robertson. I'm the author of Seven Generations. Seven Generations is a contemporary story of a young man named Edwin dealing with the impacts of the generations of his family throughout history. Today I'm going to talk about the process of how the illustrator and I integrated the script and illustrations into the graphic novel and how it worked together to create the story. The process involved first the development of a script, what would look like really a movie script or a TV script, working from describing panel to panel what happens in each panel, and then putting it there in the dialogue and captions to advance the story from a narrative standpoint. From there, Scott would take the script and he developed storyboards, little rough thumbnails of the whole script. We would meet and go through the thumbnails together and work through the layout of the graphic novel, how we wanted everything to look. And once we finalized that, he'd start working on the final artwork. I had a very explicit view of how I wanted the graphic novel to work sequentially and from an art perspective. But when Scott and I got together, we would hammer through things, and sometimes his ideas would be better than mine, and we would adapt those. And sometimes it would just be the layout of the panels on the page, and then sometimes it would be what's within the panel and what do we want to show and concentrate on. And it might be a zoom thing, or who do we want more in the panel or not. Yeah, it's just like in a movie when you have like a close shot or a medium shot or a wide shot. It's what do you want the concentration of the panel to be on? For some panels it might be the amulet. That's a constant theme in the graphic novel. And so we'd want to kind of, one of the first panels of the whole series is almost a zoom in on the amulet, where it's very noticeable within the panel on Edwin's mom. And then other shots like the Calling River. It's a very wide shot because you want that whole effect of looking at the river and the banks and the kind of whole organic feel of it. So it just depends on what you're telling in the panel and what you want visually the reader to look in and focus in on. Especially for the first book, as we got to know the quality of his art, and not just the quality, but how he was telling the story through his illustrations. I saw that there were some times when I didn't need any words in there at all. And that's a hard lesson for a writer to learn, is when do you not need to tell the story, when do you just need to show it. And so for the buffalo hunt, for example, in Stone, there's almost no words on that scene, and initially there were, just kind of explaining what was happening and everything, but when I saw the illustrations, I saw, the illustrations are telling the story, and I don't really need to add anything in here, so you cut it out. So it's kind of a less is more kind of thing, and a show don't tell. So. Anything that I write in terms of describing panels or dialogue or captions, it all advances the story, whether it's character development or plot advancement. It's all there for a purpose. There's no kind of filler. It's all there for a reason. And so in that way, being concise in writing it is really important. Well, dialogue is important in character development and story development, when it has a purpose. When you're having a 30-page graphic novel and 120 pages for the whole thing, you really want the captions and the dialogue to be concentrated, so everything has a purpose to advance the story. And sometimes it would be just actions between the characters are enough, but if you want to advance the story and develop character, you need that kind of dialogue between the characters. And with thought bubbles, it's really a really intimate inside view into someone. And so we don't use a lot of them, but when you need to get into someone's head, you'll want to use the thought bubbles to show kind of what they're thinking when you can't really do that through the art. It all depends on what kind of story you're telling within the book. Sometimes in the modern stories, say for the first couple of pages, they're very clean lines. It's a contemporary story. On page 2 in Stone, there's a panel where Edwin's mom finds him passed out on the bed because he's taken a pill overdose. Behind him, there's a dream catcher. And on the previous page was a broken photo, and the panel's cracked. And so the panel's cracked like glass, but it also looks like the dream catcher design as well. So in that way, you're really conveying more of the story through the panel. In some of the earlier panels, when you're going back to, when Stone's story happens, there's more of an organic feel sometimes. There's a page 7 on Stone shows, billowing smoke as the panels, and not, the clean jagged lines. And then in the next page, it has tree branches as the panels section. So that way, you're transitioning to the past and using that kind of mechanism to show that transition into an earlier time. One thing later on in the series is that it's actually the continuation of a longer scene. So in a way, the graphic novel jumps back from time to time and forms a complete story as the series goes on. So this is actually a continuation of a scene that you learn more about later on in the series. But for here, it just conveys kind of the urgency of her wanting someone to pick up the phone and answer. And so it's really just building that kind of sense of, something's going on here, and it's really important that she talks to whoever's on the other line. And, who's on the other line, you don't really know right now. But it's just conveying that sense of urgency. I've learned kind of how he works and the quality of what he's doing. As a storyteller, being an illustrator too, he also tells a story through his art. So I've been able to learn from that and really work on making the scripts more concise and learning from what he does so that the scripts are really print ready when he gets them. I've always hoped with this series, because it's a First Nations story that deals with a lot of really important historical pieces in the First Nations, Plains Cree specifically history, and the contemporary issues and how the past affects the present and what we're dealing with in the present. I've always hoped that this series serves as a foundational piece to learn more about the First Nations people and the history that we've encountered. And what the kind of issues that we face today, and go on to read more in a textual sense, and using the graphic novel as an entryway into that. There's actually a line in book 2 that references that exact point of how the past impacts us today. And acknowledging the past, but not letting it define us, but allowing it to help us learn about ourselves, and then go on that journey of healing in a contemporary way. When you're reading Stone, you're reading this kind of cool story, but you're learning about a lot of contemporary issues. You're learning about a lot of historical stuff, like how we used to live before contact, and it all happens through the engagement through the story, and so it's kind of subtle in that way, but it's there. And so when you read this book, you finish it, and you'll be able to pretty intelligently talk about this is how they lived back then. This is how this is what happened when they wanted to get married. This is the games they played. This is the kind of stuff that they did in terms of the Vision Quest and Sundance and all that. So it's fun in that way to tell that story in a way that's enjoyable.